And our guest host this morning is Wilbur Ross. He is chairman and CEO of W.L. Ross & Company. He was recently inducted into the Turnaround, Restructuring, and Distressed Investment Industry Hall of Fame. That and guest hosting Squawk in the same year a couple of times. It is amazing, and certainly the pinnacle of a long career, I guess. Well, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
We love having you in here. I just said, and I put a little emphasis on chairman and CEO. We've been going back and forth on this. Rex Tillerson at Exxon. Should they split the chairman and CEO? Does it make sense to do that? What's the rationale, and what are the pros and cons?
Well, I think for big public companies, it makes all the sense in the world because they need to be accountable. And I can't understand what people are trying to hide from when they don't want an outsider to be the chairperson. ArcelorMittal, for example, you're going to have Lakshmi on a little bit later, has a lead director. And you might call it lead director, you might call it chairman, same thing. There's a person, an outside director, who is in a position to hold the management accountable. I think that's useful.
So that's useful. Others would say that if you get the right guy, you want one captain. You don't want anyone second-guessing him. You don't want... You could see...
Dissent in the boardroom.
Dissent in the boardroom. You could see they might be... they may read the paper. God knows what they may be motivated by. Some wrong-minded intention that the board has that doesn't allow the CEO to do what he needs to do to run the company properly. Well, if you get the right guy, why not let him run it?
Well, you should let him run it, and I don't think that the idea of having an outside chairman is adverse to that.
What, he shows up 4 times a year and, looks at a couple of papers about how the company's run, and he should be making decisions?
There are issues like compensation. There are also issues that people get too ingrained sometimes. They don't see the forest for the trees, that kind of thing.
Well, why do we do it this way then, Wilbur? I mean, how many split chairmanship CEO positions are there in the U.S. in the Fortune 500?
I don't know the number, but there should be all.
Got to be 95% or chairman and CEO. We're doing it wrong then.
Well, I think that's just because people feel a little insecure and they want to have control of things. But I don't think it's necessary at all.
You're chairman and CEO. I don't see you.
Well, I know,
but you're Wilbur Ross.
We're not very much publicly owned.
I guess you never were either. But so when you did have publicly owned companies, you were chairman and CEO, weren't you?
No. I normally become non-executive chairman, and we have a regular full-time CEO actually run the business day to day.
Do you look for that in companies you invest in? Do you like to see those two positions split? Is it a sign of a better-run company or maybe one with more controls?
Well, we like the idea of checks and balances. I mean, I think that 99% of all American companies run properly and don't have accounting irregularities or anything like that. The idea, though, is to avoid being in the 1% that do.
How are you feeling broadly? We've been through...
You look good.
Yeah, you look terrific, as usual. We've had a crazy week, right? Some of these numbers are starting to look a little uglier. People worry about the summer. Markets seem to have put in at some sort of intermediate top. Now we got these housing prices, and oil is the story everybody wants to talk about. What's on your mind?
Well, I frankly think housing is a scarier story than oil right now. You saw those numbers that were reported yesterday, 16% down from the 2006 highs. 16% of $23 trillion means $3.8 trillion of Americans' net worth has been wiped out by that decline. That's a big, big number.
Right.
And economists allow for this sort of wealth effect or poverty effect. That's probably something like 5% of that gets reflected in consumer spending. If it is, that's $180 billion, or more than 1% of our gross domestic product. So to me, those are big, scary numbers.
We knew those numbers weren't real, though. On the way up, we knew that it couldn't last. Remember when we talked about, is it a bubble in housing? And wow, every year, 5 years, prices go up. So, I mean, some of that was like at the top where you didn't really believe it was real, right?
Well, I didn't believe it, but that doesn't mean that Joe Homeowner didn't believe it and didn't act on it.
So you're saying that spending will be impacted this year.
Oh, I believe
but
so.
more so by the wealth effect than by the money they're putting into their tank.
I think it's the cumulative thing of both things, because the money you put into the tank is actually cash out of the pocket. So that doesn't matter whether you think there's a bubble or not, it's gone.
Right.
You know, we talked to people yesterday who said we could see another 10% decline in housing prices over the next year.
Right.
So that means the end is not here. What does that tell you?
I don't think the end is remotely here. To me, the other scary thing was that the U.S. thrifts originated 20% fewer mortgages in the first quarter than they did the first quarter a year ago. That's 30-some-odd billion less in the way of mortgages. That's why you have a housing problem, is largely this credit crunch. And I think the thrifts are going to get worse. I think that they're all raising their lending standards. Federal Reserve Board survey in April said 90% of all the lending institutions in this country were tightening their standards for mortgages. Well, that's nuts. At the peak, they were lending 100% mortgages. Now prices have collapsed. Now they're tightening the standards. Yeah. We're always solving last year's problem.
Right.
Do you think, is it your guess, at least, that the markets have put in their highs for the year?
Oh, I mean, the stock markets? I'm no good at stock markets. Yeah. I'm more interested in businesses.
I can't believe you would argue that we're not even halfway through the housing crisis.
I don't think we are. No, I really don't.
It's hard for us in the media to be talking so much about it and not be. We don't get to it till we're halfway through.
Well, to me, the tricky part is how do you know you're halfway through until you know what's all the way through?
You don't know what. Yeah, you don't know the length of the tunnel.
Believe me, we'd like to sell it like we're not. I mean, we'd like to if it bleeds, it leads. But I can't, with all the
you'd think that the cover of Time and television
would that would be the timing when you see it on the cover of Time. That'd be more than halfway, Wilbur. No?
Well, I don't know halfway, three-quarters of the way. I think there's a lot more to go.
All right. You just wonder how much. Markets do have a way of discounting some of that.
Oh, they do, but I think...
I see someone named W.L. Ross buying a bunch of mortgage stuff.
Yes.
Well, but just servicing, not actual mortgages. We're chicken to buy mortgages at this point.
You could come in next week and say, yeah, we did it.
Well, that may
And you certainly wouldn't tell anyone before you did it either.
Well, we need you to make the bottom, then we can buy something.
You are sly. Thank you. Thanks, Wilbur.